Welcome to Paul's Passive House. Well, it's a new day, and I've taken off this little piece in the corner here because I want to inspect the attic. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to clean out all the loose fill that's in there, and I'd like to do it from this easy access space. As part of my strategy to insulate this addition, I'm going to be removing the loose fill and replacing it with fiberglass bats. I decided here to take out some of that insulation that's up in the attic. I wanted to see just how dirty this work was going to be before actually committing to doing it. As it turns out, it's going to be much easier to do it from the exterior, and so I've decided to do it from there. I'm not going to do it at this moment, though. I'm going to wait. From time to time, you'll see me step back and look at the wall as if maybe something might happen. Generally speaking, this is just me being confused. If I start scratching my head, then you know I'm really in trouble. If I scratch my ass and my head at the same time, then I might as well just go back inside and go back to bed. Here I'm removing the trim that's located underneath the drip edge. Now I measured the drip edge after I removed the trim and the sheathing, and as it turns out, I've got exactly 2.5 inches. So it will go right over top of the zip system sheathing that I have installed. To remove this trim, I found it easier to actually cut the nails and then use a caulking cutter to remove the trim. That worked better than prying it out, because if I pry it out of place, it's probably going to damage the drip edge. Now there's a lot of nails in this trim, and so every time I get a couple of pieces pulled off of the house, I take it over to the side of the house and throw it over the fence. The last thing I want to do is step on one of these nails, or even worse yet, is have my dog step on one of these nails. I mentioned that I'm tossing a lot of this debris over the fence into the side yard so that my dog doesn't step on it and so that I don't step on it. You should always understand that your neighbors hate this kind of stuff. And I often have my neighbors watching me or looking at me as if I'm kicking a puppy. They just don't understand why I would do all this work. And sometimes they get nosy, and they don't like the fact that there's debris in my front yard. So to the best of my ability, I try to keep it very, very clean. Keeping a clean front yard isn't the easiest thing, though, when you're constantly doing these types of tasks. And so I'm notoriously bad at this. However, I try not to keep anything out there that's garbage or trash. I try not to make it look dirty in the front of my house. If you're planning on doing any construction work, I highly recommend that you get a varying set of pry bars. Pry bars are incredibly useful. You saw me using them when I was uninstalling the OSB that used to be on the corners of these walls. And a long pry bar like this allows me to utilize torque to remove all of these trim pieces. With the last piece of trim removed, I'm going to be pulling some nails and then removing the rest of this sheathing. Before removing the zip system sheathing, I took the liberty of marking the top edge. I did that with a permanent marker. That way I could measure from the top of the roof, where the drip edge comes over, down to that marking, and then subtract my 1/4 inch. That made it really easy to install the top of the zip system over where the attic is and not have to trim any pieces when I install the 4x8 sheets that go over the main section of the wall. Now there were a lot of nails in the rocks, so I decided to take some time and clean them up. Now I'm going to be removing the zip system sheathing because I'm going to cut and install the zip system above this sheathing. And it's going to actually be pretty difficult to cut those pieces and install them with this zip system in the way. I also took some time to mark all the studs so that I could mark where the studs are on the zip system for later. Right now I'm measuring to see exactly how I'm going to install the zip system. I took the liberty of marking the studs here at the top of the wall. I wanted to make sure that all of the pieces that I cut were going to fit, and I wanted to sort of pre-fit them by marking the studs with a marker. While I was working, I happened to look up and I noticed a miracle. Something that fills every American with pride. It was a bald eagle. And after witnessing it in all of its glory, and taking off my hat and putting my hand over my heart and saluting it, I did what every American does after they see a bald eagle. I bought 2 cases of Bud Light, shot one of them with my AR-15 assault rifle, and drank the other one. And then I blacked out and pissed myself. But then after that, I thought, well, maybe I should install a bug screen. Fast forward to tomorrow, and I've already got the zip system installed. It took some doing, but I figured out exactly how to cut everything, put it in place, and then install it. As part of my strategy, I put on a bug screen. I wanted to make sure that bugs weren't infiltrating into my zip system. Bug screen's really easy to install, so it only took a few minutes. And now with the bug screen installed, I can actually secure this zip system with the correct amount of screws so that I'm at code. That means I have to put a screw every 6 inches around the entire perimeter of the zip system sheathing, and I have to put a screw for every dot that you see on the zip that also coincides with a stud. That's why those dots are there. It's to make it easy to install the screws. And again, I'm using screws because I need 4-inch screws to properly secure the 2.5-inch zip. If I had to do this over again, or if I had enough money to actually buy new material, I would have bought a thinner zip system R sheathing so that I could use nails. Or I would have bought a nail gun that allows for 4-inch nails. My nail gun maxes out at 3.5. I have to tell you though, screwing in 30 or so screws into each sheet is incredibly taxing, especially as you can see, I have braces on my elbows. I have really bad tendinitis that just started about 6 months ago, and for some reason, I just can't seem to shake it. But of course, there's no rest for the wicked. So I'm stuck using screws when a nail gun would really be much, much better. If you're ever planning on installing sheathing, it's important to start from the middle of the sheet and then work your way out to the edges, saving the corners for last. You don't want any bowing in the middle of the sheet. Planning ahead is a big part of what I do on this project. Now, my plan is to incorporate foundation insulation with the insulation I'm installing right now. However, I'm not going to do that for some months in the future, if I do it at all. First, I have to see how close I get to the passive house standard with the insulation strategy I'm employing for this phase. Now, I have a passive house project planner, which gives me a great indication of exactly what my footprint will be. But if for any reason I need to add insulation, I need to plan for that in advance. And that's what I've done with this project. You'll notice that I don't secure the zip system at the top of the wall. That's because I've only temporarily installed that sheathing. I have to remove it later to remove all of that insulation out of the attic, and I also have to liquid flash the top of that zip system sheathing. Because it's 2.5 inches thick, there's a lot of room there for bugs to get in. When I liquid flash it, it'll make it watertight, airtight, and bug-proof. And then I'll bring that flashing down the face of the zip system from beneath the drip edge about 6 inches, where I'll incorporate it in with zip tape. I'm also going to spend a fair amount of time using liquid flashing on all the screw holes and nail holes and any other holes or blemishes in the zip system itself. And I'm going to spend especially a lot of time at the bottom of the zip, where the zip meets the concrete. I'm going to take extra special care to ensure that that's air and watertight, and that I've sealed it in such a way that I can incorporate other insulation at a later date. If I ever decide to dig out this foundation and insulate it and then backfill it, I'll have a system ready for me to connect to. In this corner, I ended up not having enough stud to connect to. So instead of trying to angle the screws to get into the stud that I had, I just installed another stud. I had to do it in pieces because, of course, there's an outlet in this bay. But after I cut down the 2x4s, I installed them, and then I could connect to them instead of the 2x4 that wasn't quite thick enough to give me a surface to screw to. At the end of the day, I get pretty sore and I'm pretty tired. Now, normally I last between 4 and 6 hours before I decide to call it quits and start drinking. And as the sun slowly sets in the west, I bid you adieu.